hundreds of pages carried by members of Hezbollah have exploded across Lebanon and parts of Syria.
Israel carried out an operation against Hezbollah on Tuesday local time by hiding explosive material within a new batch of Taiwanese-made pages that had been imported into Lebanon, according to American and other officials who've been briefed on the operation. Here to unpack what it means for the region is foreign affairs expert and global futurist Dr Keith Suter. Dr Suter, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much, Ben.
So what do we know about this bizarre situation? As soon as I heard about it, I immediately thought this is the sort of old school spycraft that, was synonymous with the Cold War era, but it doesn't really feel as though it happens much anymore.
No, it's almost spycraft on steroids, you'd have to say, because clearly the Israelis, although they're not claiming any credit for this, but it's obviously an Israeli operation, were able to intercept this imported group of pager machines. The pagers are being used because if you communicate via mobile phones, they can be hacked or at least tracked by the Israelis. So they were using these messaging machines to communicate between each other. They were probably about 3,000 in the batch that were imported, looking at the number of people who have been injured. So you've got 2,800 who have been wounded by this. So the wounds are mainly in the hands of people. So they've really been able to strike a decisive blow against the Hezbollah, because clearly a number of people will have lost fingers or hands and will not be able to use weapons in any future fighting. Now, this will create a next ratcheting up of tensions between Hezbollah, which is a major group, and Israel, because the pressure will be on Hezbollah to really become much more determined to seek reprisals against Israel. So we're seeing a dramatic increase in the tensions at the northern end of Israel. Remember, Israel's already bogged down in this war in Gaza. It's having problems on the West Bank, which is actually the eastern side of Israel. And now there's been a major escalation at the northern end of the country with the border with Lebanon.
It's an ingenious method to strike at Hezbollah, but it does seem fraught with the potential for civilian or unintended casualties. In terms of the history of the IDF or the Israel spy agency, the Mossad, how does this strike compare to what we've seen before?
It's much bigger than strikes which they've done in the past. They've pulled off some remarkable operations. They had an explosive planted in a telephone of a suspected terrorist that they were after, and as the terrorist picked up the telephone exploded and blew off his head. So they are coming up with some very creative activities, but this one is bigger than all the previous ones in terms of the number of people who have been affected directly by it, either being killed or being maimed by this operation.
Hezbollah appear to have been caught completely unawares. How do you think that they're going to respond?
Well, they've obviously got to give some consideration how they can do it. They're obviously going to have to do it in connection with Iran, which is the major group giving instructions to Hezbollah. Unfortunately, Iran's ambassador to Lebanon was among the 2,800 who have been wounded by the blast. So Iran could say, well, look, even our ambassador was affected. Iran does not want to have a head-on collision with Israel at the moment until it's finished its nuclear weapons. But it may well be now subject to so much pressure that it decides, yes, we just can't keep overlooking what the Israelis are doing. We now need to retaliate big time. And the worrying situation is that Israel will now be fighting conflicts on three fronts.
And so what does this latest incident tell you about the overall state of the conflict in the region?
Well, it says that it's in a very dangerous situation, but then I've been saying that now since October, really, with the risk of escalation. And the Israelis have escalated it dramatically in the last few hours. And so we have to wait to see how Hezbollah and Iran decide to retaliate. Also, I understand some of the people who've been wounded or killed were in Syria. So you're now also going to get a pressure on Syria to retaliate against Israel as well. So that's going to be yet another conflict appearing up on the northeastern side of the Israeli border.
And do you see this as an opportunistic strike? They were able to intercept these pages and conduct this operation, and we might not necessarily see more examples of this kind of attack going forward.
Well, if I were in Hezbollah, I'd be really neurotic about picking up anything at the moment, because it just shows how the Israelis are able to infiltrate the importing system of Hezbollah, and also to be able to spend time taking the back off each of these pager machines, 3,000 perhaps in total, and then planting the explosive and get away with it. It's a remarkable operation for just sheer size of the operation. So Hezbollah must be very worried about its own security system when it comes to importing items.
Yeah, and I suspect that any reprisal attack from Hezbollah won't be nearly as sophisticated, but might be just as deadly, if not more so. Foreign Affairs
Absolutely.
expert Dr. Keith Suter, we always appreciate you sharing your insights on the Nightly Five.